Have you ever walked out on a frosty morning, cup of tea in hand, only to find your patio pots looking a little, well, shivery? Maybe the leaves have drooped, the soil's stiff with cold, and you find yourself whispering, "Hang in there, my friend, spring will come." If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Every gardener, from the spry 20-somethings to us who prefer to take our gardening in slower, more thoughtful steps, has felt that pang, that moment when you see a plant you've cared for all summer start to struggle, and you wonder if it'll make it through the winter. I still remember the first time I lost my Shasta daisies to an unexpected frost. I'd tucked them in close to the porch, thinking they'd be safe. But one chilly night, nature had other plans. The next morning, they looked like they'd seen a ghost. Since then, I've learned a few gentle tricks to keep my perennials cozy and content through the cold months, and I can't wait to share them with you today. But don't worry, friend, this isn't complicated stuff. No fancy equipment, no backbreaking work. Just calm, easy steps that anyone can do, even on a chilly afternoon with a sweater on and a warm drink nearby. By the end of this little gardening chat, you'll know exactly how to help your potted perennials not just survive winter, but thrive, so that when spring rolls around, they'll wake up fresh, strong, and ready to show off their blooms again. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like seeing your neighbors peek over the fence, surprised that your pots are already bursting with life, while theirs are still recovering. My friend Martha down the lane swears by one of these methods. Her geraniums came back so early last year that people thought she'd bought new ones. So settle in, take a deep breath, and let's bring a little warmth to those winter worries together. If you enjoy peaceful, practical gardening made easy, the kind that feels more like a cup of tea with an old friend than a lesson, tap that subscribe button and join our gentle little gardening family here at Golden Garden Wisdom. Because around here we believe that even when the garden sleeps, the gardener's heart keeps blooming. Now let's take a closer look at what happens to those potted perennials when the temperature drops. Now before we roll up our sleeves and start tucking those pots in for winter, it helps to understand why potted perennials struggle more than their in-ground cousins. You see, when a plant lives in the ground, its roots are naturally insulated by layers of soil, almost like being wrapped up in a thick, warm blanket. But when that same plant lives in a pot, it's more like sleeping outside with just a thin sheet. The cold creeps in from all sides, not just the top. Those roots, which are the plant's lifeline, feel every bit of that chill. And it's not just the cold that does the damage. Winter likes to play tricks. One day it's freezing, the next day it's thawing, then back to freezing again. That constant cycle can cause the soil to expand and contract, loosening the roots or even snapping the fine ones that take up water. Imagine trying to sip through a straw that keeps breaking. That's what your poor plant is dealing with. Then there's the sneaky problem of waterlogging. When the soil stays too wet, it freezes into solid ice around the roots. That ice doesn't just block oxygen, it can crush delicate root tissue. It's like giving your plant ice shoes it never asked for. But here's the good news, and I promise there's plenty of it. With a few thoughtful adjustments, you can turn even a tiny balcony or patio into a winter-safe haven, a place where your plants can rest comfortably, like cozy travelers waiting for spring's return train. When I was younger, I honestly thought plants just needed a good pep talk to get through the winter, so I'd stand over my pots saying, "You're strong, you can do it." Now I know they prefer a bit more insulation and a little less chatter, though I still whisper a few kind words now and then. Can't hurt, right? So don't worry if your garden space is small or if you're just learning. We'll make sure every pot on your porch, deck, or window ledge is snug and safe. Because with a few simple tricks, even the coldest months can be gentle on your green friends. Next, let's look at how to give those pots the best protection possible, starting with where to place them before the frost arrives. Alright friend, let's start with the very first step to keeping those perennials happy through the cold. Choosing the right pots. Now if you've been gardening for a while, chances are you have a few old favorites. Maybe that lovely clay pot you've had since the kids were young, or that blue ceramic one you bought on a whim because it looked so cheerful in summer. I get it, I've got a few sentimental ones myself. But here's the tricky part, those beauties don't always handle winter very well. Clay and ceramic pots, as charming as they are, tend to soak up water. When the temperature drops, that moisture freezes, expands, and crack. Suddenly your favorite pot is split in two by February. I've had it happen right on my back porch. One winter morning, I came out to find my favorite terracotta pot had smiled open like a broken cookie. Lesson learned. So if you can, switch to plastic resin or fiberglass pots for the colder months. They're lightweight, sturdy, and much more forgiving when the frost moves in. And if you really love your ceramic ones too much to part with them, don't worry, just give them a little protection. A few wraps of burlap, an old blanket, or even bubble wrap around the sides can make a surprising difference. My neighbor Henry does that every winter, and his front porch looks like a cozy quilted plant village, not a single crack in sight. One of the most important details is drainage. Make sure every pot has good holes at the bottom. If water can't escape, it turns to ice, and that's bad news for roots. You can also elevate your pots slightly on wooden blocks or old bricks to keep them from sitting in puddles. A little lift goes a long way in keeping them dry and happy. And here's a simple rule of thumb I like to follow. If you can lift it, you can wrap it. Even a few layers of bubble wrap or burlap will give your pots just enough insulation to make it through those frosty nights. It's a bit like tucking them into bed with an extra blanket, and we all know how nice that feels on a cold evening. I always say if my plants could talk, they'd probably thank me for the snug treatment, maybe even ask for a cup of cocoa. So take a moment this week to look around your garden or balcony, check those pots, test the drainage, and see which ones might need a little winter coat. Once that's done, we'll move on to the next step, finding the perfect sheltered spot to keep your perennials cozy all season long. Now that your pots are ready and snug, it's time for step 2, giving them a good neighborhood to spend the winter in. You see, just like us, plants do better when they've got a little company. When you move your pots close together, they share warmth, almost like old friends huddled around a fire on a chilly evening. The air between them stays a bit warmer, the wind doesn't bite as hard, and everyone gets through the season a little easier. Start by finding a sheltered spot, maybe along the side of your house, tucked beside a sturdy fence, or under the gentle protection of an overhang or porch roof. Those spots tend to hold a bit of warmth from the building, and stay drier during heavy frost or snow. I like to line my pots along the brick wall by my kitchen. It catches the afternoon sun, and the warmth from the wall keeps the soil just soft enough that my perennials never freeze solid. Avoid open windy areas. Even the hardiest plants can struggle when cold air keeps whipping around them all day and night. Think of it like trying to stay warm while standing in front of a fan. Not very cozy. If your garden is exposed, you can create a little barrier using old boards, a short trellis, or even a row of evergreen branches. It doesn't have to look fancy. Your plants care more about comfort than style this time of year. And if you have any especially delicate perennials, like ferns, herbs, or young plants that haven't quite toughened up yet, consider giving them a winter vacation indoors. A garage, shed, or cold frame can be just the right balance of cool and protected. They'll rest quietly there until spring calls them back out again. Now, a little tip that always makes me smile: even plants enjoy a little neighborhood. They stay warmer when they're together. But don't crowd them too much. They still need a bit of elbow room, just like us at family dinners. Sometimes when I see my grouped pots all lined up neatly for winter, I can't help but think they look like a choir, each one waiting patiently for its turn to sing again in spring. And oh, when that time comes, what a joyful song it is. So go ahead, gather your pots together, give them a good spot out of the wind, and make sure everyone's got just enough space to breathe. You'll be amazed how much stronger and happier they'll look when the first warm days arrive. Next, we'll look at how to wrap and mulch those pots so they stay as snug as can be through the heart of winter. Now that your pots have found their little winter neighborhood, it's time for step 3, adding mulch and insulation, the gardening world's version of a warm blanket and a good night's sleep. This part is simple, a bit hands-on, and honestly quite comforting. Think of it as tucking your plants into bed for the season. Start by covering the soil surface in each pot with a layer of something soft and protective. Straw, shredded leaves, or even pine needles work beautifully. These natural materials trap air and create a gentle barrier between the cold air above and the roots below. If you listen closely while spreading them, you might even hear the faint rustle of autumn saying its last goodbye. For tender perennials, those that don't handle cold quite as bravely, go a step further. Mound the mulch right up to the crown of the plant, where the stems meet the soil. That's their most vulnerable spot, the one that feels the chill first. Giving it an extra layer is like pulling the quilt up over their shoulders before lights out. Now don't stop with just the soil. The pots themselves deserve a bit of warmth too. You can wrap them with old towels, blankets, or burlap sacks. Nothing fancy, whatever you've got on hand. My friend Doris uses an old patchwork quilt she made decades ago to wrap the big planters by her porch. She says it makes the garden look like it's getting ready for story time. And here's a handy little pro tip. If you've got old newspapers or cardboard boxes lying around, don't toss them out. Fold them up and use them as quick wind barriers or layers of extra insulation around your pots. It's thrifty, it's effective, and honestly, it feels good to give those scraps one last purpose before recycling. You'll notice as you work, there's something very peaceful about this step. The rhythm of spreading mulch, the soft rustle of leaves, the gentle patting down, it almost feels like the garden is sighing with relief. By the time you're done, your pots will look snug, secure, and ready for the long rest ahead. And come spring, when those green shoots peek up through the mulch, you'll know your care made all the difference. So take your time, enjoy the quiet, and remember, this isn't just about protecting plants. It's about honoring the rhythm of the seasons and the joy of caring for life in all its stages. Now that our perennials are tucked in, let's move on to how to water and monitor them through the cold months, because even in winter, a little sip of care goes a long way. Now let's talk about something many gardeners forget once the chill sets in: watering. It might seem odd to think about giving your plants a drink in winter, but a little care here can make all the difference between a plant that sleeps peacefully and one that wakes up weak in spring. Before the ground or your potting mix starts to freeze solid, give your perennials a good deep watering. This helps the roots store enough moisture to carry them through those long, dry weeks ahead. Think of it like sending them off to bed with a warm cup of tea, just enough to settle in for the night. But once the cold really settles in, it's time to ease off. Don't overwater during winter. When the soil is cold and wet, the roots can't take up moisture the same way, and too much sitting water can lead to rot, the quiet troublemaker of winter gardening. The key is to find balance. Every few weeks, if the weather's mild and the soil isn't frozen, go ahead and check. Slip your finger into the soil, or tilt the pot gently to feel the weight. If it feels feather light, it may be time for a small drink. If it's still damp and cool to the touch, let it be. Here's an easy way to picture it. You want the soil to feel like a wrung-out sponge. Damp, not dripping. Just enough moisture to keep the roots comfortable without drowning them in the cold. And here's a little trick that's helped me over the years. Set a reminder. Maybe a quiet alert on your phone, or a note scribbled on the kitchen calendar, the way we used to jot things down in the old seed catalogs. It's easy to forget about those pots once winter routines take over, but a gentle nudge helps you keep that rhythm of care alive. I have a sticky note by my teapot that just says, "Check the pots." Every time I make my morning brew, it reminds me to step outside for a quick peek, even if it's just to say hello and make sure everyone's still snug. With just a bit of mindful watering, you'll keep those roots healthy, hydrated, and ready to burst into life when the first warm days return. Next, we'll look at how to watch for signs of stress and keep your perennials cozy until spring's grand return. Now that we've got our pots wrapped, mulched, and properly watered, it's time to talk about which perennials need the most protection, because not all plants face winter with the same courage. Some stand tall through the frost like seasoned veterans, while others shiver at the first sign of a cold breeze. Let's start with the hardy ones, the garden heroes. Plants like sedum, coneflowers, daylilies, and hostas are tough as nails. These are the kinds that seem to say, "Go on, winter, do your worst." Their roots can handle the chill, especially when given a little insulation. If you've got these in your pots, you can relax a bit. Just follow the basic protection steps, and they'll reward you come spring with fresh green shoots that seem to rise out of nowhere. Now, on the other hand, some plants are a little more tender. They like a gentler touch. Lavender, heuchera, also called coral bells, salvia, and small herbs like thyme or rosemary all appreciate extra care. These beauties can be sensitive to root freeze, so be sure they're tucked in near the house or in a spot that gets a bit of shelter from the wind. A wrap of burlap or a few extra inches of mulch can make a world of difference for them. And then there are the semi-hardy tropicals, plants like ferns, begonias, or anything that still looks a bit too delicate to face a frosty night alone. These should come inside if you can manage it. Even a cool garage or enclosed porch can help them sleep safely through the cold months. My friend Clara keeps her big fern in a corner by the kitchen window every winter. She says it's become part of the family by now. Now, I want to say something that's important, especially for those of us who pour our hearts into every pot. Don't feel discouraged if you lose one or two along the way. Even the most experienced gardeners, the ones with decades of soil under their nails, still lose a few plants each winter. It's just part of the cycle. Nature teaches us that not every season is about perfect success. Sometimes it's about resilience and learning what thrives in your care. So take it easy on yourself. Celebrate the survivors, learn from the ones that didn't make it, and remember, every spring gives us another chance to plant again, to nurture and to grow alongside our gardens. I always say if a few don't make it, it just gives you an excuse to visit the nursery come April. And who doesn't love a good reason to bring home something new and blooming? Now that we know who needs the most protection, let's finish strong with a few bonus tips to keep your garden spirits high and your patio full of life, even in the quiet heart of winter. Before we wrap up our time together, let's sprinkle in a few bonus winter care secrets, the kind of gentle, practical touches that make the season not only easier for your plants, but more enjoyable for you too. First, keep a little garden thermometer nearby. It doesn't have to be fancy, just one you can glance at before bed or while you sip your morning tea. When you see the temperature dipping below freezing, that's your cue to toss a light cover or frost cloth over your pots for the night. It's a small effort that can save you a lot of heartbreak come morning. Second, here's a clever trick that'll make your spring self very happy. Label or paint each pot before winter settles in. Once those plants die back and everything turns brown, it can be easy to forget what's where. A simple tag or a cheerful bit of paint can turn spring cleanup into a fun little reveal, instead of a guessing game. I learned that lesson the hard way one April. I spent weeks wondering why my lavender smelled suspiciously like oregano. Third, if your garden starts to look a bit bare once the frost moves in, add a few evergreen pots, things like dwarf boxwoods, hellebores, or even small potted conifers. They keep their leaves through winter, and that splash of green does wonders for the spirit on those gray, misty mornings. My friend Harold keeps 2 boxwoods by his doorstep all winter. He says they remind him that life never truly leaves the garden, it just changes its rhythm. And here's a tip your back will thank you for. Use rolling plant stands or sturdy trays with wheels. When you need to move pots in and out of shelter, it saves you the heavy lifting. A small kindness to yourself that keeps gardening comfortable even when it's chilly out. And remember, there's beauty even in the resting garden. Those quiet pots, sitting patiently through frost and wind, are dreaming of spring just like we are. Beneath the mulch and the blankets, tiny roots are alive and waiting. They trust just as we do that warmth and sunlight will return in time. So as you finish preparing your garden for winter, take a moment to breathe it all in. The stillness, the promise, the quiet peace that comes only when the earth is resting. You've done your part, friend. Now let nature do hers.
Thank you for spending this calm moment in the garden with me today. If this brought you a bit of warmth, hope, or inspiration, give the video a gentle thumbs up and subscribe for more peaceful, practical wisdom right here at Golden Garden Wisdom. Until next time, keep your heart open, your hands in the soil, and remember, every sleeping garden is a promise waiting to bloom again. So my dear gardening friends, let's take a quiet moment to look back on what we've learned together today. We began by learning how to choose the right pots, sturdy ones that can stand up to winter's chill without cracking under pressure. Then we grouped them close, letting them share warmth like old companions gathered around a fire. We tucked them in with mulch and blankets, wrapped in comfort and care. We also remembered to water wisely, not too much, not too little, keeping that soil just damp enough, like a wrung-out sponge on a cool morning. And finally, we talked about how to protect our tender ones, the lavenders, the herbs, and the delicate tropicals that need just a little extra love to see them through. Each of these small steps adds up to something truly wonderful. A little care now means your garden friends will greet you again when the snow melts, stronger, greener, and ready to fill your patio with life once more. So as you step back and look over your resting garden, know that it's not empty, it's simply resting. Beneath the quiet surface, your plants are dreaming, and soon enough they'll wake to meet you with open leaves and fresh blooms. Until then, keep your gloves nearby, your heart steady, and your hope warm, because in every sleeping pot there's a promise of spring, and in every gardener, a quiet faith that life always finds its way back to the light. Thank you for joining me today here at Golden Garden Wisdom, where every season has something gentle to teach. As we come to the close of our little winter garden journey, let's pause for a moment to reflect. Remember, winter doesn't mean the end of gardening, it's simply a quieter chapter. Beneath the frost and snow, every root is resting, storing strength and quietly preparing for the next bloom. Your perennials may be still and silent now, but soon, with the first hint of warmth, they'll stretch, awaken, and reward you for all the care you've given. If you've enjoyed this calm garden chat today, why not give it a gentle thumbs up? And while you're at it, subscribe for more cozy practical tips from your friends here at Golden Garden Wisdom. Until next time, keep your hands warm, your heart in the garden, and your eyes open for the quiet miracles that each season brings.